house enjoyers, are you ready for some nautical nonsense? I have built you a ship. And yes, I'm still working on beta, even though housing has gone live on early access. This is because some rooms turned out to not be accessible on early access, so if I wanted to use the outdoor daylight room, I needed to do it on beta. This actually works out perfectly because the war resource costs for all these tables is very expensive. So in order to make this build, I had to dupe my accounts a couple of times through beta shenanigans to get enough war resources to buy enough tables to build myself a ship. Let's figure out how I did it. But first, before we dive in, I'm coming to you not with an ad, not with a sponsor, just an alert about free Warcraft comics that you could be reading right now. For those of you who knew me before I lost my mind for housing, you might be familiar with the fact that I'm a Warcraft community artist, and I run a yearly fan-made Warcraft comic anthology. It's called Interlude. It welcomes artists of all skill levels and comic making experience, and it's a huge labor of love. You might have heard about it before when Blizzard was kind enough to feature our very first issue, right when we were first starting to create it. So since then, there have been 3 interludes, and our 4th issue released digitally just this past week. The theme this year is housing. It's not only free to read, it is our largest issue yet. This thing is a monster. It is over 150 pages. It has 43 comics from over 50 contributors about their characters experiencing home. Whether that is a person, place, or a thing, we are telling the stories of Azeroth at home. So it's very suited to the content of this channel. You can read it right now on our website. We have a nifty little comic reader, so you can even flip the pages to get the full comic experience. And it works on mobile too. If you want a physical copy of the issue, just like these, the pre-orders are open right now. They're on my website. And they'll be open through the end of the month. At that point, I'll tally up the number that have been pre-ordered, send that number over to the printer to be our first print run, and the books will be shipping out in early 2026. I'll put a link down below to the site where you can take a look. And remember, the digital version is completely free. No sign up, no paywall, nothing. Just go to the site, read it like, ye old webcomics of old. All I'm asking for are your eyeballs on the project, because these artists and writers put so much work into their comics that the least I can do to repay them is to shout from the rooftops, "Everyone look at this amazing art that we have created together." So now, with that out of the way, back to the ship. So, how did we make this ship? I started out with 2 canoes. These are Tauren canoes from High Mountain. I sized them up to 200%, and I used them as kind of a skeleton for the ship I knew I was going to make. I used 2 of them just because one didn't quite give me the proportions I wanted, and I knew it would be difficult to hide these kind of tips at the front and back, so I figured, kind of spacing them out throughout the build would be a smart option. With the skeleton in place, I then started to place these hull and home tables, the small and large ones, around the structure I'd made. Altogether, the ship looks a little bit ramshackle because it's been cobbled together with lots of different Kultiran decor, but that actually fits the Kultiran aesthetic. It's kind of working backwards because their buildings are already kind of pieced together through parts of ships. So what I'm doing is kind of putting the ship back together. I knew on a ship like this we would need a couple different levels of decks. So we have the foredeck, we have the aft deck, we have the stern up there. Don't come for me if I'm using the wrong boat terminology. I am not that much of a boat sicko to know all of the proper terms. However, it was very helpful to look up reference images of real tall ships and also Warcraft tall ships to know exactly how I wanted to form these decks. You can see here that I'm using Orgrimmar beams to kind of cover up seams in the tables. How did I make the masts? They are columns. The main part here is the Belemeth column, and then above that I used Orgrimmar columns scaled down to kind of make the cross beams up on top. How did I scale down those beams though? Well, and I'm not sure if this is a bug or not, if you have one of these selected in advanced mode, you can hit the bracket keys on your keyboard and that will scale them up and down, even though the UI doesn't want you to scale columns like this. With this trick, I was able to put the masts together, place them on the deck, and then place sails all along them. These are the durable folk balances. Later on in the build, I dyed them to be Kultiran green. I'll usually put dyes in last when I'm doing a build. Because I used Night Elf columns for the 2 main masts, I wanted to cover up that kind of Belemeth detail. I used the Whitewash River Basket, which is another High Mountain Tauren item, to cover up those designs. Doing the bow was probably the hardest part because I knew I needed the form to kind of taper up towards the front piece here. I tried putting just one fireplace at the front, but then I ended up deciding that 2 fireplaces, one on each side, was the correct way to go. And these are the Tide Sage's fireplace from the Shrine of the Storm. Also helpful here was using coffin lids as a taper shape to get this kind of wedge form at the front. I also added these Tier Guard emblems to the front of the ship to add some detail. It was also useful to cover up the seams of the tables, the coffins, and the fireplace in kind of a nasty snarl at the front. So slapping a shield on that was a good compromise in my opinion. Stairs were also important to go from the different decks. Because space was very limited at the back, I turned the beams and sunk them into the build. At first, I didn't think I'd be able to add rigging to the ship, but when I noticed that the Borealis string lights didn't look that bad, I said, why not? Let's make it festive. So you can see that there are party lights all over the boat. Maybe that's bad for, hiding from pirates, but for creating a festive atmosphere, it works pretty well. The rear of the ship is a Gundergar's Grand Keg, just one, scaled up large and clipped into the rest of the build. Originally, I thought I might cover this in tables as well, but once I had the windows in place, it looked pretty okay and I left it alone. To create the ship's wheel, I used an Admiral chandelier, the short one, and kind of clipped the rope from that into a Hull and Home dresser. There's a couple great little details, like I sunk these Hull and Home chairs into the deck to create cleat points, where rigging would attach to. Because the deck is pretty small, I didn't want to overload the ship with these, but that's something you could do if you really wanted to. To create the illusion of water around the room, I used circular woolen rugs to create a flat plane of color. I decided that the Colterian steel was the correct color that I wanted to go for. It matched the ship well, and it also looked close enough to the color in the skybox. You can see that this build is pretty limited by the size of the daylight skybox room. We are kind of hitting the very front of it with the bow. We are kind of hitting the very top of it with the mast. Maybe Blizzard will add bigger skyboxes in the future, but I don't know if that's going to be a priority for them. Ultimately, I'm pretty happy with this build. This would be a great place to RP. I'm not looking forward to rebuilding it on live when that eventually is possible, but I'll do it. I will do it. Thank you so much for checking out my ship build. I'm excited for this to be one of my first big showcase builds, and I'm looking forward to what comes next on WoW Housing, whether that's in early access or on beta. Thank you!